Going live, and the first few seconds of live just goes into the nethery. It just doesn't actually get broadcasted. So around here is when the broadcast actually happens. But okay, hey everyone, good morning. Welcome back to the second day of our live stream. I want to say like marathon at this point. Ha Phan is with us today. She is the I'm gonna say principal designer and I guess technologist or inventor on the design, technology, and AI side at Zillow. I'm completely butchering everything. Ha, please correct me.
I'll correct you later.
Yeah. But she's here today, and she's just such a wonderful guest because I feel like her background and her experience is radically different than most other designers that we see in AI and in tech right now. And whereas most designers are kind of leaning heavily into craft, I feel like Ha is still very different despite everything. And I appreciate that so much. So we were just chatting right before we went live, and I felt like we had to start because Ha was getting to something really, really good. But Ha, would you mind introducing yourself because I totally messed it up?
Well, before we start,
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for doing this marathon that you're doing. It's such a wonderful way to bring our design community together and to contribute meaningfully. And I really, really appreciate it, which is one of the reasons why when you asked me, I was like, I'm there.
Oh, thank you.
So I really appreciate that, Hang. It's amazing what you're doing. Um, let's see. Oh, I have to introduce myself. Oh,
Oh,
another thing I have to make clear. If any of my Zillow teammates are watching, I did take time off for this, so I'm not doing this on the company dime. Um, let's see. Introducing what I do. So I'm principal designer on the design tech and AI team. So what our team does is we work on the riskiest bets in the company. We imagine the future. So just that alone basically requires that we sometimes can't use the same tools. We have to figure out different ways of imagining things. But yes, a lot of what we do is we work on products where the AI is integrated into the product, into the experience itself, or the AI is part of the value chain. And what I mean by that is that the way that people talk about AI on LinkedIn is when I see a post on LinkedIn about AI, it's usually like, I use this tool to do research. I use this, I use AI to synthesize my research. I use AI, to, write my brief, whatever. It's these tools that help optimize your workflow. The kind of work that we do is we work on experiences that integrate AI, or we invent new ways of interacting. We think about what inventions or what new experiences that we could use AI for. So I have to tread very lightly here because I don't want to give away any IP or break my NDA. But one of the things that's already out there right now on Zillow is on some of the listings, you can see your floor plan. So we do use AI for that. So for a lot of the work that I do, AI generates the media that we can use in the experience. So when I talk about AI, I lean very heavily in computer vision. And actually, this started when I worked at GoPro, where we use computer vision to figure out like the best moments in the video. So when I talk about AI, it's heavily leaning towards computer vision and media. Let's see, I did have 4.5 years working on search. That was incredibly informative, and it changed me a lot as a designer also. So that's a really long-winded answer, but that gives you an idea on the breadth of kind of the stuff that I do. Or we'll go more into it if you want to, but I'm still finding it very difficult to talk about what I do, or even having the vocabulary to talk about what I do, because very few people work on these kind of problems, and without like a case study, it's very difficult to explain. It's very abstract, and I'm patiently waiting for the day where something I build will be released, and then I can refer to it so people can know what I'm talking about.
I appreciate that. I feel like when we talk about AI in design, oftentimes it's just a ChatGPT wrapper, and or we're talking about prototyping, AI experiences, but always around a chatbot or a chat interface. So what you're talking about, I think, is very novel and different when it comes to designing for AI. I do want to mention real quick, everyone, if you haven't donated yet, please. We have a suggested donation rate of $25 to help Tiffany rebuild her life in her home after losing it. I see that David Hunt just recently donated $200. Thank you so much, David. And as well as Christina Brown and Brian Z. Thank you all so much for donating. The more we can help Tiffany get to the goal of $26,000, the sooner the better. It's just such a devastating time for a lot of folks. So really appreciate all the help that you can give everyone. Back to topic. I feel like we were just talking about your career early on, and I found it to be really fascinating because oftentimes people are asking you, what was your career like and how that's different than, say, the average designer, how that's led you to working on really cutting edge AI interactions right now.
Yeah, I remember we had this conversation when we met one time, and you said to me, "You're an outlier." I always thought about that. I've been doing this a long time, so I have like 30 years experience because I'm super old. So I've seen the whole user-centered design thing and how it's evolved. And I've worked on every single thing from e-commerce sites for life science companies to the first, I think it was a KCRW media player when we were using Flash. I've done everything you can possibly think of. But I really think that my experience at GoPro changed me. And the reason for that is because when you work with videos, the nuance in the interaction is it's something you can't prototype on a fake mud. At the time people were using Sketch. These are very dynamic experiences, right? And the reason why the experience at GoPro was so different was because, one, we were working with these experiences that feel very alive, and then it was my first foray into emergent tech. So I was working on things that were like, we worked on this new app that enable users to create videos. We call them stories that were synced to music. So we wanted people to create videos really quickly, like within 5 minutes, that are emotional. And then, because at the time when people think about video editing, they think about Premiere or Final Cut Pro, and they have a very difficult time. The consumers have a very difficult time creating video. So I'm going to take you back to that time. At that time, Instagram didn't have videos. And then when they did have videos, it was 30 seconds. So people didn't have an understanding of videos. Now, when I go to TikTok, I'm like, holy crap, people are doing all these amazing things with videos. So at the time, it wasn't in their mental model of how they want to tell a story, right? So the team iterated on this live code prototype. And then we used up to one of those research labs where it was super fun. We had one of those research labs where you have like the two-way mirror thing, so you can stand right up to the mirror and see what people are doing.
Yeah.
And then the researcher would be in the room, walk the user through the prototype, and then leave the room, give them the task, go create your video, leave the room. And we all stand behind the mirror and watch the user. And the cool thing about that was that sometimes you see people's body language. So they would create their video, and they would do this, like they're just like so proud of themselves, you know. But that experience taught me a lot, because I learned about behavior research in that experience. Because we never build the perfect experience to test. We always build divergent experiences to test. And we intentionally take things away to force the user to make trade-offs. The other thing I learned was that before our team built that, the design team had built, UI of video players and, ways of creating clips and so on. But they were only testing the UI. And what we realized was that what we think the highlight of a video should be is very personalized. So when we ran our research, we had users upload their own video into, this FTP site at the time. And then in that experience, we also learned what a highlight should be, right? And then a highlight, there are highlights that a machine learning model can, kind of guess. So for example, there were a couple of models that the machine learning engineers were working on that time. And it was super fun to see their hypothesis play out. So for example, the most common one is that the model recognizes a face. So that facial recognition is pretty common. Another one that we utilized was around sound. And the reason for this is that when you use an action camera, the times when you exclaim or crash on a bike makes a good story. So when you're running in that, maybe you're mountain biking and you crash and you go, oh shit, right? That's a good story highlight, right?
Yeah.
We call that an interest moment. So when you kind of think about all these interest moments that the machine learning model recognizes, they become, like suggested highlights in your video. So the experience of working with that, with machine learning engineers and understanding the nuances of that, where the user actually gives input, those are all kind of lessons I've learned. And then extrapolating that into thinking about design, it made me think about information architecture in a completely different way. I started thinking about data as signals, or interaction as signals, behavioral signals that inform machine learning models to, over time, to get better at guessing these things, inferring these things. And then there's the whole research process that goes into building and testing experience with these things. I also worked on the first post-capture experience for a 360 camera. And at that time, the camera did not exist. We were working with the Frankenstein camera. And it was basically two GoPros like smashed together.
Yeah.
And so we built the first prototype in terms of what the experience would be, when you're interacting with the 360 camera, where the camera sees more than you. Like you can't see behind, in the back of your head, for example. But I remember at the time, my PM at the time, who was my partner, said something I always remember. He said, I remember like thinking about the experience. He said that humans cannot understand 360, only chickens. And what he means by that is that, you have like eyes on the side, but it's actually a really amazing, like an astute insight. So, because if you think about it, and you can translate it to software, right? You can translate to software. You can think about like, whenever humans have to, when we need like more awareness, we build UI, right? When you think about backing, the camera for your car, you can't see behind you. So, you have to like rely on the camera behind your car. Same thing with a pilot. But in addition to that, there are physics and cognition that's tied to it. So for example, when we build experiences for 360 cameras, we rely on the horizon line being constant. Because if the horizon line is not constant, then we get nauseous, right? So it's all these very, very it's these principles about how we move around in the world that informs the design and the decisions we make and the constraints we make when we design these experiences. So that experience at GoPro shifted how I thought about how humans move around the world, what I can push as a designer. It gave me a lot of confidence after, because I had to, in kind of like pitching the initiative for the first 360 camera, I had to go sell it across the company, from software to hardware. So to build that influence and alignment across the company was a challenge, but it gave me a lot of new muscles I didn't know I had. So the reason why that story is so important is because there were a lot of things I'd never done before. And so I became kind of fearless after that. But then when I left GoPro, I applied for this job as a UX designer at Pluralsight because they did something with video. And so I thought, oh, I'll apply for that. But when I went to that job or that interview, I presented the case studies, the ones I just told you about. And the hiring manager said, you shouldn't be a designer, you should be a product manager. And the interviewing panel was machine learning engineers, one designer, and a VP who had a design background. So that's how I became a PM. Was I interviewed for a design role, showed the case study, and was offered the PM job.
What do you
so I'll stop there. I've been talking a lot.
Yeah. No, this is fascinating. I have so many questions now. But first, what part of your portfolio or your case study presentation changed their mind and made them feel like you're probably more of a PM than a designer? Like, was there a single aspect of it, or maybe it was just the entire overarching story?
I think the overarching story, but also I remember I presented that case study at a lot of conferences at that time, and I always framed it as experiment after experiment. So it was very research focused, and also like the way the story is told. I became pretty good at telling the story of whatever product I work on, because there's a pacing to it, and I know I just know how to frame the problem, and then it was like around, basically I framed the problem first, and let me play back in my head how I did it. So I actually gave my brother a GoPro session camera for Christmas one year, and he shared with me like all these pain points he had, and then he also showed me like all the stuff he captured. So I took that case study and I used that as like the problem framing, and I also used the videos he created. So I just told it from a user point of view, but it was all like live media. Like, here's the video he created. He went from this to this, So it was very framing around the problem, but it's easy to tell a story around GoPro and make it really dynamic and fun because it's such a sexy product. It's not like, here's the enterprise app and there's like customers, sure. So it's all about, it's very authentic. And I told the story around the customer pain point of view, but then I made the complex really simple for them to understand. but the whole thing was framed around 3 core experiments that we ran and insights that came out of that. Um, and just the novelty of the innovation that came out of it, that, like no matter how many times I showed that, I really hate showing that case study because I've talked about it so many times. But no matter how many times I showed it, people are like still amazed. And that was like almost 10 years ago. But I hate talking about that case study, but people love seeing it every time I present it.
Is there a recording of it somewhere?
I don't think so. And here's the reason. It's really hard for me to, this is another reason why I don't like to talk at conferences, because people record it. And here's the reason why. Almost everything I present have video. And conferences don't do a good job at recording the video. They just record what you say, or these flat screens. They don't record the video. And for that case study, the music was really important, because basically you're going to see the story, right? The moments in the video. And then each time it hits a key point, the music syncs to it. So you can see how the music creates the emotion in the video, right? So those kind of things really hard to, I really get annoyed when I get recorded and the video is not shown, because the magic is in the video. So that, I think it's a combination of things, combination of storytelling, of the research thinking that went into it. And so from that experience, I feel like the way I describe me now is I describe myself as an applied researcher for AI. But I mean, everything I do resembles design, but it's how I think about the problem.
I hope you would reconsider and then maybe record your presentation on your own with the videos and music and everything so people can watch it, because it sounds fascinating.
Well, I'm waiting for what I'm going to produce from Zillow. So then that will replace that, because I think what's coming is going to be pretty amazing.
I hate asking this question because I just feel like it's such low level, but it's so low level, but at the same time, it will help with my framing of understanding what you did at GoPro. Like, what kind of tools were you using for something like that? Like, you can't prototype that in Sketch back then. Definitely still not in Figma, even to this day.
So at the time, we did have a prototyper on the team, but I was using Sketch at the time, and then my role on the team. So the team collectively built the prototype, if that makes sense. But my role was basically synthesizing the research that came out of that. And so, yeah, so that carries even to today when I work at Zillow. We don't have all the tools. We don't have the tools to imagine these experiences. So currently the tools I use today is Protopie. And then I still use Figma, but I only use Figma to kind of like think, like that first step where you conceptually, it's almost like sketching for me, Figma. It's just like, I'm going to lay out these ideas very simply. And then usually from that, then I go into Protopie. But Protopie only enables me to communicate how it feels. It's not fully interactive because the experiences we build are so complex. And so I'll give you this example. So I think I kind of like create how I want to work. So initially I create the first prototype. And it was kind of clunky, but it got the point across. So I showed it to our engineering manager, and she put together, I said, just give me, one, just maybe 2 people to help me bring this to life. But because when she saw it, she was like, okay, we'll bring this to life. But
Wow.
but I already understood. So having been a PM and a director of product before Search, I had worked with data scientists, and I kind of had a plan before I told her to do that. So when I was working on search, what we did was this data scientist, I was sometimes like sketch ideas on a napkin, and then on my whiteboard, and then take a picture and send it to the data scientist. And sometimes they have this sandbox and they would prototype, right? And so the sandbox is a way for the team to kind of share a common truth about an idea. Like sometimes when you talk about an idea, it doesn't mean anything until you actually see it. You see all the dimensions of the data. You can load new data sources into it. You can, like maybe change the configuration from different contexts. So I took that kind of like background with me. So when the engineer first built the first prototype, I told him, I said, hey, can you do the divergent idea, which is this other idea? Like instead of doing this, let's do this. And then can you have like a configuration we can load this data into it? So then basically over time, they understood that the prototype is a way for us to try out different things. And then the configurations enable us to shape the UX automation for the experience. And then I set the goal for the prototype as it being the artifact that enables me to run research. So the reason why we configure the prototype that way is because, like, for example, when I run research, I can shift from configuration 1 to configuration 3. Or like when I need to present to any stakeholder, they would ask me, well, what happens to this? I go, wait a minute, let me just go to the prototype and change it. So I have like this God mode where I could shift different things, but those configurations are based on the questions that the team has, right? Like, for example, we can understand the inaccuracies of the AI model. We can understand how it feels, when you interact with it. So the configurations themselves are the questions that we ask as a team about the UX. Goes all the way from the data input to the experience. So, because the data that you input into the prototype changes it. So it gives you a very holistic view of how you build a complex product like that. And then the scientists on the team, the engineers on the team are internalizing this, this whole thing with you. And then I run the research myself. So basically I do it really fast. I run the research really, really fast. So the team gets feedback. They can iterate on the prototype. And then when it comes time to create design specs, I say, go look at the prototype. It's 90% there. So it's this co-creation process that is super powerful. And it started way back when I was at GoPro. It's just a lot more sophisticated. I took everything I learned along the way, working with engineers, with data scientists, and pretty much, work this very similarly now at Zillow.
I see. I just want to take a moment to say thank you so much to Safe. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, for your donation of $25, and David earlier of over $200. We're only $33 away from $15,000. So that's a big progress. Thank you so much, everyone. If you haven't donated yet, please make a suggested donation of $25. Any amount is great. If you can afford a little bit more, we greatly appreciate it. Less is okay too. Anything helps. Thank you so much, everyone. I feel like when you're talking about your experience and how at GoPro that was transformative in terms of you learning or coming up with your own process that works to this day. For folks and designers who don't really have this kind of opportunity to work at a place like GoPro where you can trial video and prototype things like that, what are some ways that they can pick up the necessary skills to work with AI in the same way that you do?
I don't want to obsess too much about AI.
Okay.
Mainly because I think I would apply the same process to other things.
I see.
when I was a director of product at Pluralsight, I managed both PMs and designers. And I used to say I coached the PMs to be UX designers, and I coached the UX designers to be PMs. But one of the key things I coach designers on is divergent thinking. And I coach them to have a research mindset. So because even the things I'm doing today, all of the activities is to arrive at a proof that we can test, right? So when we were building Search, I had a senior designer on the team at that time, and we had this Wednesday working meeting, and people could come with anything they want to, they're working on. It could be a roadmap. It could be an experiment that they're designing. It could be explorations. But one of the things I pushed for was prolific explorations. So I don't care if it's wrong, just have a lot of concepts, okay? And then the other thing that I push designers to do is to articulate the hypothesis in every concept they present. So why is this, why does this achieve the outcome? Sometimes the PMs aren't that clear in the outcome, so we would make one up. We're I think the outcome is this. But just practicing putting those things down. And then when they are ready to run research, I would kind of push them to ask the question, what is the foil to your favorite idea? Right? So if you design this favorite idea, you have to design a foil. So then we designed an experiment around your core position and then the foil. And then I basically coach them to run the research that way. And then the other thing that we do is I would push them to also try to define the measurable outcomes, or what kind of metrics should they identify to say that, to prove that this worked. And it doesn't matter if it's wrong. It's just that they have to attempt it. And then the other thing that once you distill it down to to a thing that you want to test or run an experiment on, and then we usually write up an experiment plan. And initially, it took us a while to do that, but afterwards it became like a muscle. We're like, okay, ready? Okay, fill out the experiment plan. It was within an hour, then we talk with engineering when we're going to release and all that stuff. But we also had an analyst on the team, and the analyst was sort of the person who held us, kept us honest. So they would say, oh, okay, maybe you shouldn't measure this, but you should measure this. Or maybe you want to add this other thing here to make sure that there's rigor in the experiment. So the thing that I coach designers on is to kind of think about their design the way they would design research, try to prove themselves wrong. And it was a thing that changed me. And the reason why it was so important was because I never became too in love with any idea I have. And being prolific really stretch your muscles in terms of being really creative and think about, and with the outcome in mind, you start to think about interaction as data signals, interaction as behaviors that you want to amplify. So those kind of things, that is core to me. If you can't do that, then it doesn't matter, AI or whatever. If you can't do that, then you're solutionizing. You're not manifesting your questions.
Sorry. Do you think what you do is possible in a smaller company, like say a startup? Or
Yes, I think it is possible. It's actually more possible.
how so? Because I feel like oftentimes in startups, it's like you have a founder or maybe a PM, and they can be extremely solution oriented because they have an idea of what they want to build already. And the role of the designer there is often to just kind of create what they have in their mind and make it look really good and kind of elevate the craft of this product or this feature.
So there's this communication craft that's required. Um, I, I think that you can't do that if you're not a mature designer.
Huh.
Okay, right? So if you have a research mindset, it doesn't matter where you are. You're just you're gonna kill it no matter where you are. Okay, and the mindset that you need to have as a designer is that you're gonna make other people better. That's the mindset I have. So no matter where you go, you're gonna find people who have strong opinions, and they're just opinions, right? Some of those opinions are informed by more data, and so or just more experience. So, but they're still opinions, and so even to do your job well, you need to articulate the risk in that opinion. So what I normally do is just for me to understand. So one of the key values I learned working at Pluralsight was that they had this values called seek context with intent. I still use that today. So before I jump to any conclusion, I want to learn everything I can about your context, right? You're coming to me with something. I'm like, so what I normally do is I would listen, but then I try to articulate the hypothesis behind it. So if somebody comes to me and says, I think it should be done this way, and I was like, and in my mind, I'm like formulating the hypothesis. I would say, hey, so is your hypothesis that the user would prefer this over this? Or is your hypothesis that if we amplify this, then this will happen? And so when you clarify that, it becomes a question and it becomes a thing to prove. Okay. And so that's why it doesn't matter. It's like if you work with a stakeholder who's like has strong opinions, then when you articulate that as a hypothesis, you're set out to prove that or disprove it.
I see. Okay. I wish I thought of it that way
Yeah. So
earlier.
I really get annoyed with, like I've seen PMs who are given a problem and then this happened to me. I was at Pluralsight, so I hope people don't. But I was at Pluralsight, and then I would see teams given the problem, and they just go and do it because some leader dictated to them. And they asked my opinion about it, and I was like, I don't think this is the right way to go. I think it's a poor bet. And I explained to them why, right? And my opinion is that when you're given a problem or some leader tell you to do it, it's just for you to do the due diligence to know that it's the right thing to do. Because even if it's the right thing to do, there's 1,000 nuance that would make it good or worse. So I view every opinion as a hypothesis.
I feel like there's also a certain amount of diplomacy that you employ to make this work.
I'm a terrible diplomat, okay? I'm very direct. But I use research as my way of, I use research as diplomacy. So if you can articulate clear positions, or you can ask follow-up questions to clarify, you can help people think clearer. Or if you can't at that time, you're just trying to understand everything you can about the position. And then so using my designer's mind, I would take that position. I say, okay, I'm going to explore it. I'm going to explore all the foils to that position. And if I were to run a research to know, like, if it's a true trade-off that the customer or user are willing to make, how would I design that experiment? So when you bring it back, you can have meaningful conversations backed by data instead of like, I don't agree for whatever reason, right? One of the things that I feel like I'm on a crusade for is to get designers to think and communicate more pragmatically and clearly. I'll give you an example. Like, I can't stand when people use delight. I just can't stand it. Because it's like saying, I want to build an experience that's awesome. Like delightful. Like, delightful can mean it's more efficient. If delightful means more efficient, how is it more efficient? How is it more efficient than what? So I think that when you think as a researcher, you are forced to be very, very clear about like writing a hypothesis is very, very hard. And a lot of people write these lame hypotheses at the beginning. I can't write a hypothesis until I am deep in the problem and understand all the nuance of it. So understanding how to conduct good research and create and design experiments is really critical. But once you've done that, it gives you all kinds of superpowers. It gives you like confidence in conviction in things that you're building. It gives you new communication tools. And I feel like that's my main role today. I tell my boss that all the time. I said, I'm just an applied researcher on the science team. But like when you think about what we do as designers, we come up with ideas, right? We explore. Embedded in each of those explorations is a hypothesis about behavior.
Can you tell us about the research that you do? Because it feels like it's so hard to run research these days on design teams. We have fewer researchers than we did years ago, and there's less tolerance for running research studies.
I empathize with that. When I was at Pluralsight, we didn't have a research team. But because I've had R&D experience, I took that to the team. So are you asking me how to conduct research in a company that doesn't have research discipline?
Well, yes, but in the sense of how do you get them to agree to do this to begin with? Because
I don't even ask.
You just do it.
I just do it.
Can you tell us more in terms of like, because, okay, so
it's part of the job. You know what I'm saying? It's like you come up with you have a problem. You don't know if the problem is right. So, like sometimes people give you requirements or like, I think the problem is this. And you're like, okay, I'm game. I believe it, Yeah. And then you explore it. And then in the process, when you're doing it, what happens is you're going to find that you're missing context. You have more questions. No. So you might go to the PM, or you might say, hey, I need to talk to the customer myself. That's part of that.
Yes.
Right. Or I might say, okay, I understand the problem, but I don't know what trade-off that the customer is willing to make. Or I might say, the current narrative or consensus in the company is that this is the way to go. Okay, so my goal is to disprove that. And it's not to disprove to say we're going to kill it. If you try to disprove it and the customer still feels like that's the right thing, then you got something. And then they would articulate to you why that is actually better. and they'll give you your strategy without you having to like come up with all these things yourself, right? So it's just, for me, just part of the process. So a lot of times when people see me present my presentations for my work, they would say, well, how did you do that? And I said, I actually did think of that the moment I come up with the first research, because I'm already thinking like, this is the hypothesis, so this is the direction, the conviction of behind this thing. And if it's wrong, then, you change that, right? But it's the moment that you design the first thing that you have conviction around, and you probably have to do a lot of investigation to say that this is the way to go. You cannot not do research. You can, unless it's like something you have a lot of clarity on already, right? So, for example, you've been in a company that it's a really mature product. You know a lot about it. You're an enterprise company, and you already know a lot. You have all of these examples of, or you've heard this over and over again from customers, right? It's the same thing. Like when we were at building the first media manager at GoPro, we didn't need to know a lot. There was like so many media managers around, right? But when you're encountering a new thing, if there's a lot of gaps in your knowledge, then you have to conduct research. If design doesn't conduct research, design doesn't own anything. Design isn't beholden to anything. Design is just doing what product says.
So I'm going to make this about me for a second, because I realize that I'm just asking you, like, it actually sounds like a dumb question. Like, how do you do research? But so part of the issues that I feel like many designers face is the fact that it's so hard to get access to users, and you have PMs who often gatekeep that. So I can give you examples. I worked at a board governance software company, and our users were board directors. So we couldn't just like reach out to them. There's also very little data being collected because they care very much about privacy. And for example, they don't want anyone to know just how little they prepare for board meeting by reading the board books. So we actually don't even know if they read the board books or not. And we also wouldn't be able to call them very easily because they're so time poor. These are some of the most powerful, richest people on earth. Like, do they really want to talk to a user researcher? We couldn't even pay them enough money to get access to them. And then at another job, I worked on robotics, where the robot would be inside a warehouse in somewhere, say Memphis or in Bentonville. And it's not something where I can easily go and get access to that. So part of the work for me was just to convince somebody very high up that research was valuable and necessary. And at the same time, those same people have asymmetrical goals where they just really want us to build something, right?
Yeah.
They're just like, I have this idea and we are employing you, designer, and I'm a VP or C-level person, and I'm telling you to do something, and you're making this request back to me before you'll do something. And it just kind of gets into this back and forth where it doesn't really, I know what kind of research I want to do, but it's just so hard to do that. And I feel like a lot of designers kind of face this wall right now.
I can only give you examples of how I navigate some of those things.
Sure.
But it requires a certain level of savviness.
Yeah, which I don't have.
Dude, we've all been there. It's just like, there were a couple examples where I don't recall like exactly. I'm trying to remember like the context. It was a scenario where I was a director and we had a PM who was working in this space, and she needed to talk to certain customers. Okay, like they're segmented, and these are not. It's not like you can go recruit these people. So I built a relationship with sales. And then I knew a few salespeople. And then I basically, I was trying to learn from sales first because I didn't understand the space enough.
Right.
So kind of like using sales as a proxy. And then from that, salespeople introduce us to customers. So it's a lot of relationship building, but sales wasn't gatekeeping at all. Maybe other people were, but I just kind of figured out like who can give me access, kind of, and then build relationships like that. I don't have an answer. It's sort of like, how do you navigate the politics of the company?
Right. How long did it take you to
Not
build that
very
kind of
long, actually. There's another thing that's called street creds. So if you've been successful, you've got some success under your belt, then people are more willing to bend. Like at the beginning, nobody listened to me. They're just like, who is this person? But then later on, once I've had some street creds, and people are like more open to helping you.
Do you just kind of go with the flow for the first several months before you start trying to change processes and maybe do more research? Build the street
That's a
cred
loaded
first?
answer. I mean, that's a loaded question. It depends.
Yeah.
It depends if you're a designer or you're a product manager. I have one principle that I follow, that I actually give to all of the PMs. I have one new PM who used to work for me. And it's funny, she now works at another company, and she sent me a text one day, and she said, I just want you to know that I still use this principle. It works really well. And now I actually give somebody the same advice. And that advice is that for PMs is to ship within the first 6 months. Like whatever you do, you gotta ship. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I say it depends is because I think you need to figure out like what impact you're gonna, what you're gonna make. And it's not about research or anything. It's about like, how do you what kind of clip, like how do you make, like for me, the first 6 months at Zillow was more about I did run research the first 6 months at Zillow. I was on this initiative, and I just started tinkering, and then I started like prototyping, and I said, I think this is the research we need to run. So I just did it.
Right.
But I'm trying to think of other companies. It just depends. It's not. I don't always do that, but I think my goal is to figure out like what kind of impact do I need to make. How do I build momentum and take us to the next thing? Like if a team doesn't know what they're going to do, then your goal is to get to that clarity, and then you're onboarding at the same time. So I think that you have to have humility and just learn as much as you can. But you should try to like make some impact within your first 6 months. I have that 6 months is for me the threshold for a lot of things. 6 months is 6 months is like usually the time for an MVP. You have to show something within 6 months. After 6 months, if you're building some 0 to 1 product, if you have no kind of traction or no tangible result, doesn't mean shippable or some tangible thing, then the team start to get demoralized. I think Tony Fadell actually talked about this. He worked on Nest. He said 6 months is like the threshold for a lot of things.
For designers, is it also to ship something 6 months?
It depends on the problem they're working on. I would say they should.
Yeah. So you've kind of effortlessly switched from product management to design multiple times, or back and forth a few times. And right now there seems to be some kind of a movement for designers to go into product management, probably due to the shift toward more craft-oriented design work. What do you think is missing in most designers' repertoire that prevents them from easily transitioning into product management, short of having that in their resume already?
I was thinking about like what things I learned when I was shifting to product, right? when I was a designer, I always thought I can do a better job. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
all designers have that thing, but it's actually not true.
Yeah. I learned it the hard way.
But yeah, you're
Yeah. I was like, I could do this. Like, can't be that hard. And then Debbie was like, I give you a 2 out of 10. I'm
I
like,
work with some
okay.
amazing product managers, so it is a really hard job. But I'll just tell you the things that I learned that were surprising to me. Not surprising, but like blind spots, whatever, right? And but also like the thing that gave me an edge over other PMs. So just a caveat, like before I left GoPro, I was already named an acting PM. So I was the only designer who was attending PM meetings for a time, right? Acting PM for advanced tech, because I just knew so much about it that I was telling PMs like we should do this or whatever when in terms of the roadmap. So anyway, so what I learned when I became a PM, I think everybody talks about the business side of things. The key thing, the things around that is sort of like you get to understand, like, actually you have visibility. This is key. It's not that designers can't learn it. They don't have visibility. I attend more meetings around ROI and understanding like what key metrics the company cares about, what key health metrics company care about. Just that language around value. I had visibility to that designers did not have. Another thing was there's a whole language around bets and objectives. So that that whole exposure to the product language, that's one. But it also forces me to think about what bets. I started to think about bets over experiences, sort of like which problem is worth solving to drive certain objectives. So you start thinking about that. I see a lot of designers who transition to product where they solve a problem because it's a pain point, but it doesn't necessarily return enough ROI, if that makes sense. It's like, right, that's a pain point, but does it really yield more value? So it shifts your thinking around between UX versus the return on investment. It shifts your thinking in terms of that. So you start to like think of like every effort. You start like, it makes me think about the company's purse as my own. And then the other thing that was that I learned was just to think quantitatively. The designer's language is around qualitative. Thinking quantitatively enables you to think about like segmentation, target audience. And that actually, if you are designers who can do that, it crystallizes the outcomes you can create. I'll give you an example where we tie this together. When I was at Pluralsight, we ran I was assigned to solve this problem for certification at the time. And the team before us only kind of like, figured out like, they just create this whole way of browsing a bunch of content around certifications. And when a new leader came on board, they assigned me the problem, like make certification more discoverable. That was one. But then the other one was like create a certification center. And I said, there's no way I can do that within this small amount of time because there's so many different topics. So what I did was I looked at like what are the most popular certifications that are getting traction in our platform. And then we learned, not surprisingly, that it was all the cloud certifications. So I assigned a PM to only work on those. And I said, go look at all the niche products that are doing that well, because they only focus on one domain at a time. And then do it better than they do as an MVP. So you kind of like target only a segment, and then you try to prove that out. And that is like the anchor of how you build value. And then you that gives you like some foothold before you can to buy you time. So you start thinking about things like that. You start thinking about like what's the right scope and what's the right bet to make, to learn and to kind of grow. So you start thinking about quantitatively, but also the bigger business bets you're trying to make. The other things I've learned is the whole thing around communication. Communication is huge. There's like leadership principles there. I was a really hesitant leader. I didn't see myself as a leader. So that was my own blocker.
Why not?
Because, when you look around, up to that point in my career, when I look around, I didn't see myself reflected in other design leaders. I was much more analytical and much more direct. I also see all these leaders who are just men. And I didn't feel like I fit that mold. And so I couldn't demand a kind of respect or something. But that changed for me when I built Search, was because I learned that that it's really hard to advocate for yourself, but it's really easy to advocate for other people. So when I figured out that, I just kind of internally felt it, when I advocate for my team, so that became my compass. And in return, the team made me into a leader. The team trusted me. And it was the engineers on the team who made me into the leader. They completely trusted me. And I found that so surprising. Every day I go to work, I'm thinking, I'm totally underqualified for this job. But after a few successes with an engineering team who really trusted me, I found my voice. Let's put it that way.
I love that. Do you have a few more minutes? We're a little bit over time.
Oh, okay.
I want to ask, when you were at GoPro and you became an acting PM, was that kind of the process you followed to kind of move into that?
It's not like I didn't plan it. It's sort of like my career is pretty organic. It's sort of like I started attending these meetings as all PM, and then somebody just asked me that, and I said, okay. Most of the time it's been like that.
Thank you. Thank you so much today for sharing all this. I know we're over time right now, and I know you must be extremely busy, and I appreciate that so much. We've raised over $300 during this call, and we just crossed over $15,000, $15,067 for Tiffany, thanks to donations from anonymous individual as well as John Moore. Thank you again, John, for donating for the fourth time already. Really appreciate it. And Ha, I love everything you say when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm learning so much about how you navigate leadership and I guess workplace politics. The way you just describe it seems almost non-political. It just seems very natural. And it's so inspirational how you can, I don't know, you just operate at a very different level than most other people that I know on both the design and product side. And it's really cool. Just it's super inspirational, because I feel like most times you're just kind of hearing about how people say, oh, you do this, this, and this, and you're like a PM or a designer. And the way you describe it is completely novel in ways that I just haven't heard from other people. So thank thank you so much for coming on today and to give us your perspective in all this.
I just want to say, Hang, that I appreciate the passion that you bring to everything that you do is very apparent. And just again, thanks for doing this. I know you must be exhausted, but really appreciate that you bring us together.
Oh, thank you, Ha. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been tired, but it's been really fun as well. And thank you again for coming on. I've learned so much, and I hope to chat with you soon again.
All right. I'll see ya. Bye.
See you around. Take care. All right, so everyone, thank you so much for staying through the whole hour. That has been incredibly educational for me. I hope you found the same value that I did. We're at $15,067 raised for Tiffany, and we're at 58% of our goals. I need to update the little graphic on the bottom right. If you haven't donated yet, please use the QR code or the link in the chats, which I will paste right now, and make a donation. We have a suggested amount, $25. If you can afford a little bit more, we would greatly appreciate it. Any less, we would appreciate it as well. So thank you so much. And of course, if you engage with the post, like it or comment and stuff, that also gives us more reach and helps us meet our donation goals. We have more events coming up. So I'm going to share that right now so that we can look at other stuff available. So give me 1 second. So this whole calendar, if you go to Luma or lu.ma/DGMMM, you'll be able to access the calendar. And next at 2 o'clock, I'm going to have a talk with Brian Lin, the design director of growth at HelloFresh. I'm going to be talking about all the spicy takes around craft and building and shipping as a design director. So that's going to be really cool. And at the same time, Tommy Gioco is going to be showing how he uses AI to leverage his design powers I guess he's probably going to be building an app live using AI. So that's going to be really entertaining. I can't wait to watch that. Unfortunately, we're coinciding, but I'm definitely going to watch recording afterwards. And at 3 o'clock, we're going to have Building Leverage as a Designer with Elizabeth Ali on YouTube. So just check on the Luma calendar and you'll be able to get the access there. And then tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'm going to have a career coaching call with Allison Gretz. That's going to be over Zoom. So sign up for that. Allison's a really amazing career coach for designers. She's going to be teaching you all about how to get promoted, navigating politics at work and all that jazz, and also, finding a job. So she's great. And then we have live portfolio reviews with Miranda Slater. So there's a bunch of stuff that's coming up. Please go to the website, subscribe, and then find the events that you like and attend those. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to see you in a few hours at 2 o'clock with Brian Lin. Thanks again for watching, and please donate. It's so meaningful. It's going to make a big impact on Tiffany's life. We appreciate you. Thank you.